part 5 and final of this series on the law of one in Greek philosophy, which is going to end with Anaxagoras and Democritus. Anaxagoras is going to take the biggest chunk of our video today because of, again, the parallels that existed between his thinking and the law of one and the model that we know now. Now, Democritus was somebody else that I just wanted to include here because in my way of portraying this Greek thought and how it evolved, I needed to end with Democritus just for the idea of how, to me, it deviated into a more scientific pursuit as opposed to including as much as possible the what I would call Parmenides started dividing. Now remember, Parmenides was the person that created this paradoxical view on reality by saying that nothing could become because it had already existed then. So it was not possible not to exist, so therefore everything had to exist always, and the world was an illusion. So he was right, and if you watch that video, you would see my points there, that even though it's very confusing and it created paradoxes and it was very controversial, it really had some good points, because what Parmenides was trying to do was to explain what the Chinese said, we cannot explain this, and this is what Lao Tzu said, he called the Tao, something that could not be explained, could not be conceptualized. So to me, a lot of the problems that Parmenides faced was trying to conceptualize this, even what we call in the law of one, intelligent infinity, which is something that cannot be conceptualized, cannot be put into terms, cannot be explained. Any idea of it is wrong because it's inherent in the way infinity is. Infinity cannot be explained by anything. It simply is. And it can be experienced, it could be felt, but it cannot be explained. So this is what, to me, Parmenides faced, and why, and the reason why I'm mentioning this is because from Heraclitus before, we were having a very unified way of thinking in terms of the introspection to find the logos, as he called it, this intelligence. And also that there was a constant change, a constant flux, like Heraclitus said. But Parmenides found this logical, too reasonable. He was an extremist in terms of reasoning, and because of that, it kind of gave an orientation to Greek philosophy that we discussed already with Empedocles, who did a phenomenal job at creating a model, and that's, you know, the past video that you should have watched if you're watching this. But now we're going to get into Anaxagoras. And before I get ahead of myself and start talking more, Anaxagoras actually tackled a really good part of it that was left out by Empedocles, but it also worked with the idea of Parmenides saying that nothing could become. So again, long introduction just to get into Anaxagoras, which is trying to recap everything that we have talked about in Greek philosophy and how the law of one, to me, has an influence in it in terms of how we perceive reality through the law of one and how they perceive reality back then, or trying to decode reality. And decode is a word that we're going to find here with Anaxagoras, which actually had some really, really good insights. So the first thing that characterizes Anaxagoras is that he was the first one to separate mind and matter. Remember, we can say that Greek philosophy was still, I would say, carrying the idea of the Greek gods and mythology, where things were alive. There was hylozoism, which is that matter was alive in and of itself. But Anaxagoras was the first one to separate, like, okay, there is matter and then there is mind. or intelligence, and then there is matter, which is interesting for Western thought because that's exactly how we started evolving over time in the Western world. Quite different than, say, Eastern philosophy. So it's important to know that Anaxagoras, because of this, and again, coming out of Parmenides, if I haven't mentioned already, Parmenides is thought or mentioned to be within scholars that there is the pre-Socratics philosophers that are previous to Socrates, and in that chunk or that bunch of people, there is pre-Parmenides and post-Parmenides, if you will, because of the radical views that Parmenides introduced into our philosophies. And now other philosophers had to work with the good points that Parmenides had. And well, I mean, that's just, I can speculate that it was, a deviation or not, but it's just how it was, They just wanted to go more into the empirical. So Anaxagoras, again, was the first one to separate mind and matter. That's a one bullet point that's important to note there or explain. His personality, again, is kind of like Heraclitus in a way, that he rejected his wealth and status to dedicate his life to the study of philosophy. And he would go on to say that he was a citizen of the universe. And this is important for me to mention here because back then there was a lot, and there's still a lot of pride in the cities or the country where they lived, and that's why they were called so and so of Ephesus or of Miletus or what have you. But Anaxagoras was just Anaxagoras. He said, I am a citizen of the universe. So you can see already, and the reason why I like to mention these things is because you can see through the mind of the person behind the thoughts. And he was definitely somebody who did not consider that, there were other peoples and then there is the Greeks, that pride. He was not proud at all in that sense. And to me, that speaks a lot to give credibility to his philosophy in and of itself, a lot at least, to say the least. So that's why I wanted to mention it there. Now, the way he revolutionized, to me, the thinking was that he said that everything was in everything. It's almost like the coding in DNA, and this is going to be one of my biggest points on Anaxagoras. The thing why he wanted to say this is because Empedocles described how things could be created out of the four elements by getting together and forming something. But Anaxagoras went a little, Parmenidician here and said that, then you're creating something out of something that didn't exist before. So to him, everything had to be in everything. And the way he described it was that everything was in different concentrations, which is the next part of the slide that I have. But to make sense of it, he said that things existed, everything existed in everything. So in, say, my pencil, there was hair, there was blood, there was air, there was water, there was everything. And there was metal, of course, just that existed in different concentrations. So he said that things just became depending on the concentrations, and we would just perceive the highest concentration of something. So that's how he said. Now, to me, this speaks more of DNA or the way, or a deeper intelligence, which it was something that, curiously, he was also insightful about, which is the mind. And we're going to get to that. But when he said that everything was in everything, to me, it sounds more like DNA forming something. But even beyond DNA, just the intelligence of the cosmos, the energy, the intelligent energy, as we call it in the Law of One, which is, to me, he didn't get that deep into what we now know as intelligent energy, which is the product of the creation, which is everything manifested. But it's pretty close, and that's why, to me, I give him that point definitely there. So yeah, he thought that everything was in different concentrations, like I said. Now next, he said that hylozoism was assumed to be alive, and that was including matter. And he attributed this to to the mind. And here we're going to get into the biggest point on Anaxagoras, where he said that the mind was an intelligent force that moved everything in the universe. So this is huge. This is huge because the mind, as he perceived it, was a universal thing that created everything or moved everything to create things. And this is, in essence, intelligent infinity, acting as the second aspect of intelligent infinity, which is not complete unity, but in the way that we tapped its potential to create things. And when I say we, I'm talking about us as well, because we are sub-creators, if you will. Use that term for who we are and how we manifest things. So the mind was definitely one of his biggest contribution to me into the idea of the law of one and how we perceive it. And again, try to use this term law of one for us who study it and have some information about the nature of reality in that model. But it's not something that was like, we can see it present in history, sure, but it wasn't known as the law of one until just recent times, of course, with the channeling. So I'm using the term loosely to refer to a thought, and even Ra said, it's the same information that is always and ever the same. So to me, Anaxagoras was exposed to this type of information somehow. Because of the way he described the mind. And again, he was the first one to separate mind and matter. And this is how he attributed it. And Hylozoism, again, is just that everything was alive. And this was from the old idea that the gods, were making things alive and everything was spirited, so to speak. So now it's like a more scientific view, if you want to see it that way. So Anaxagoras definitely had something really, really good going on here. And I'm just going to read a quote here from him where he said that, "For mind is the finest of all things and the purest. It has all knowledge about everything and the greatest power, and mind controls all things, both great and small, that have life." So, I mean, that really sums up, the way we see intelligent energy. Anaxagoras, to me, was really on point. So, to finish up with Anaxagoras, he said that mind initiated the creation and gave life to matter. And this is something that is, it's huge for us who know that mind is intelligent infinity. And also that our mind, the human mind, is a reflection of the mind, the universal mind. If you see, I have lowercase mind, our mind, and the universal mind as capital to denote that he was talking about the universal mind, the one that governs everything. So we are a fractalized version, Anaxagoras said. To me, this is one of the biggest things that Anaxagoras said. Way over what he said about everything being in everything, which is a parallel to DNA, but this is to me the biggest thing. So there was a huge contribution of Anaxagoras by saying this, because it now has into the model of Greek philosophy the potential of using this mind as something that was underlying everything, and it couldn't be understood. Just like I cannot understand your mind, you shouldn't be able to understand the universal mind. You have your own mind to make things in this dense reality, if you see it that way. So again, I geek out when I see this from Anaxagoras, because he's talking about the intelligent infinity right there, the creator itself, and the way we see it in the law of one. He would also say that in the beginning, matter was static in infinite time, and that mind started everything. Again, this is in essence what Empedocles was talking about with the first stage of love, the domain of love, or the first stage of his creation. That in the beginning, matter was just static in time. There was nothing going on. And it brings up about unity in intelligent infinity. And then the mind started everything, by mind being this self-awareness to create the universe as we know it in the law of one model. And again, If you haven't watched, that video came out already with session 27 talking about intelligent infinity, and the rest of session 28 and 29 talks about this too. So go watch it. It's going to make more sense too. If you're interested in this part of the law of one, which is intelligent infinity, the creation of the universe. So really cool, that part of Anaxagoras as well, saying that the mind created everything, matter being in just static. And then finally, I have the important part of Anaxagoras, which is that he combined the teleological arguments, which is purpose, and mechanistic without purpose of the cosmos in a kind of erratic way, I have to say. So what this means is that teleological arguments are always saying that there is a purpose in the universe. And again, this is even when we talk about in the law of one, and we say that there is a purpose for this universe, and it's for the creator to experience itself and to have an experience. That's a teleological argument. There is a purpose to this creation, and there is a mechanistic view of the world, which is the conventional science that we know that governs this world, where it says, in academically as well, in colleges, and this is not even considered a possibility in our scientific view of the cosmos. That's why it's called separatist in a way, or just conventional science just thinks of the cosmos as mechanistic without a purpose. The cosmos has no purpose. Everything is just action, reaction, and it's like Alan Watts used to say, billiard balls being struck by another one and just moving around, and everything is just chance, and there is no intelligence, there is no mind aside from our consciousness, which is just some fluke in the system. So Anaxagoras had this two going on by saying that in the beginning mind created everything, but he was also quoted to say a lot that the rest was mechanistic. There was to me, I don't think Anaxagoras was fully understood. Again, this is just me. I think he was right in the sense that everything was created for a purpose. But when you study the creation, it seems like it's very mechanistic, which it is. It's part of the creation as well. So you can have both. But Anaxagoras apparently didn't follow through too much with his unification, and this is where Plato shone at that time. So that is with Anaxagoras. I think it was phenomenal, his contribution, at least with a big part of the mind, the universal mind, creating everything and moving everything. So we're gonna now move into Democritus just to finish this video and the series for now, until further notice, if ever. And Democritus, I wanted to include it again because he was famously known for his theory on atoms, and atoms being a word in Greek meaning atomos, which in Spanish is the same, a being a way or un, as we know, and tomos being cuttable or divisible, and that's what atomos comes from. He said that atoms had no qualia, and this is something that starts to give the biggest point that I have for Democritus, which is our perception. Atoms have no specific characteristic that would describe them. Like, atoms weren't red, they weren't sweet, they didn't create anything. They were just like basic fundamental particles that created things. And it would go to create and manifest the multiplicity of things. Now, we can go back to the beginning with Thales. Thales was one of his first thoughts was, how can there exist multiplicity and unity at the same time? Where Democritus was saying that we had atoms, that's unity. There is one specific structure or particles that created the structure of everything else, and from the arrangement of them we can have multiplicity. So for that, Democritus said, and I think this is huge for the mind, is that atoms had no qualia. Qualia mean this qualities that make up our subjective experience, what we have in reality. If something is sweet for me, it might be sour to you. for some reason. Something that is, how many times have we argued the color of something? It's a perception thing. So they have no qualities whatsoever, atoms, just created things. And this goes on again with my interpretation that the great implication on the mind and how we decode and construct our reality is in the mind and not so much in the physical manifestation of everything. So his ethical ideas resemble a lot the state of harmonious mind with self-discipline. This is another thing that Democritus was very well known for, is that he talked about the ethicals, the ethics of the society, where something that was started to come up, and this is where Socrates got more involved, and this is the turn in Greek philosophy where Socrates and Plato specifically solidify with Aristotle, was that the mind had a almost like a pure way of being, and they were striving to get to that point. And that got into something different in Greek philosophy, and that's why I didn't want to include it in this series, because it goes beyond the law of one. But going back to the law of one, and to finish up this series and this video, of course, is that Democritus said that it was all interpretation of the mind. The atoms were there to construct reality, but it was us who were decoding it, and we're feeling it, and we're sensing it. But also, he said that a lot of it had to do with the harmonious mind and the way of self-discipline, the way of us doing what Heraclitus said, introspection, how we live our lives. And it's funny that I mentioned Heraclitus, because Heraclitus was known as the weeping philosopher, whereas Democritus was known for his jovial attitude and ways of seeing life. So the two of them are actually paired together in many ways to show the two sides of how to see reality, as a weeping philosopher or as a very joyful philosopher, as Democritus was. So with that, I guess it's a good way to end the series and to finish up saying that even though we have had different ways, and this would be my conclusion for sure in my philosophy in general, is that we can get hung up on many ways to describe and see how Greek philosophers argue with each other, and they had this empirical way to see the world, and they were trying to explain the unexplainable in a model that would make sense. That really doesn't leave us anywhere. It doesn't lead us to a place where we can be harmonious with ourselves. And great that Democritus said it. Many others have said it as well, that we have to just be at peace with ourselves and enjoy life, enjoy the experience that we're having. We don't have to agree with Parmenides or Heraclitus or Democritus or even the philosophers of our times, Nietzsche and so on. I mean, why do we need to agree with what they say? It's great to see how they thought back then and how even people think right now. Even myself, the way I think may be interesting to you, but you don't have to abide to anything that I say. And it's encouraged for you to give a different type of hue to this vision of reality and see it yourself. So if anything, philosophy is just a way to study the way we perceive reality within ourselves and among ourselves too, and then discuss it, have a good time. It's almost like singing, everything is music, everything is waves in any case. So life is just meant to be enjoyed. And with that, I guess I have nothing else to say about Greek philosophy and the law of one. I just wanted to make this series to follow up on that mention that I believe was in session 23 in the law of one. And here it is. I finish it up. I feel good with myself. And thank you so much for watching as usual. I'll see you in the next video.